All right, so today we're digging into a really interesting puzzle in the world of sports. We're talking about athlete wellness apps, all this amazing tech that promises to keep athletes at their peak. But here's the thing, they often fail. So we've got the tools, why is it so incredibly hard to get them to actually work?
I mean, this is the question, right? It's the tightrope every single athlete and coach has to walk. You push just a little too hard and suddenly you're dealing with injuries, sickness, complete burnout. But if you don't push hard enough, you're leaving wins on the table. Nailing that balance? Well, that's the holy grail of sports.
And for the longest time, the best we could do was a coach's gut feeling or just asking an athlete how they felt. But in today's data-driven world, that's not enough. Teams have been desperate for something more reliable, something that can get inside an athlete's head and see how they're really handling the grind.
Okay, so this brings us to the big idea, something called athlete self-report measures, or ASRMs for short. Now that sounds technical, but really it's simple. We're talking about things like daily questionnaires or diaries where athletes can rate their fatigue, their mood, how they slept, their stress levels, all of it. It sounds basic, but the concept is a potential game changer. And you can see why everyone got so excited about them. On paper, the promise here is massive. You've got a tool that's not just cheap and super easy to roll out, but get this, it's often more sensitive than a lot of fancy, expensive lab tests. The research shows that how an athlete feels can actually be the best early warning system we have, predicting everything from a simple cold to a devastating injury. Which of course brings us to the central mystery here. If these ASRMs are so simple, so affordable, and so powerful, why do so many teams completely botch the execution? Why does the data they collect so often end up being totally worthless? There's this huge, frustrating gap between the idea and the reality. And this quote from the study we're looking at just nails the biggest problem. It's not the tech, it's us, it's human nature. Think about it. Athletes are trained their whole lives to be tough, to play through pain. So they might fake good, pretending they feel great because they're terrified of looking weak, of losing their spot on the roster, or being told they have to sit out. So to figure out how to fix this, we've got to break the problem down into a couple of key parts. First, let's talk about the tool itself, because before we even get to the athlete's mindset, the actual technology has to be on point. You would think this stuff is obvious, but it gets messed up all the time. The app has to be mobile first. No one's logging into a clunky website in the locker room. The interface has to be dead simple. The study found that every extra click just causes more athletes to give up. The questions have to be specific, not some vague "how are you feeling?" And maybe most important of all, it has to be lightning fast.
So what happens when it's not fast? When the tool becomes a chore? Well, this quote from an athlete tells you everything you need to know. They don't just stop doing it. They just start tapping buttons without thinking. And the result? You get a database full of perfectly completed surveys that are completely meaningless. The system looks like it's working, but it's all an illusion.
Okay, so let's imagine you did it. You built the perfect app. It's beautiful, it's fast, the questions are brilliant. You're still only halfway home. Now we have to talk about the second, and honestly, the much trickier part, the human environment this perfect tool has to live in.
For any of this to work, the athletes have to actually believe in it. So what makes them buy in? Well, the data is pretty clear. A whopping 75% of it comes down to just two things. First, educating them on why they're doing this. And second, giving them regular feedback, showing them that their data is actually being used to help them. If you don't do that, it all just feels like homework.
And here's the kicker. That buy-in can't just come from the athletes or the sports science staff. The most powerful person in that locker room is the coach. And if the coach doesn't believe in the system, it is dead on arrival. The entire culture of a team flows from the top down. Man, this quote is just brutal. It perfectly captures that culture clash. You can have the most advanced app on the planet, but if your coach's philosophy is basically suck it up, then why would any athlete ever report that they're tired? They know the data will either be ignored or, even worse, used against them. The app stops being a tool for help and becomes a liability. So how do teams try to make sure people fill these things out? The study found two basic methods, the carrot and the stick. The carrot, positive reinforcement, it had some, but pretty limited success. But the stick, punishing athletes with things like extra laps for not doing the survey, that was a total disaster. It just created a culture of fear, which, you guessed it, led to athletes either rushing their answers or just straight up lying. All right, so we've looked at the tech and we've looked at the team culture. So for this last part, let's put it all together and see what a system that actually works looks like.
And here's the biggest takeaway. You can't fix this with one simple tweak. You can't just buy a fancier app, and you can't just give one motivational speech and call it a day. To be successful, you have to think about the entire ecosystem, from the person writing the code to the person leading the team.
It really boils down to two essential halves of the same whole. On one side, you need the measure itself to be great, well-designed, easy to access, and quick. But just as important is the other side, the social environment. You have to have a culture of trust, where athletes and coaches are on the same page, and where data leads to support, not punishment.
And in the end, it all comes back to this one key sentence from the study. It sounds academic, but what it's really saying is that there's no silver bullet. It's a multi-factorial problem. You need a solution that involves everyone. The software developer, the head coach, the strength coach, and the athlete. Everybody has to be part of it.
So maybe that's the final thought to leave you with. Tech in sports is amazing, but it's never a magic wand. It's just a tool. And any tool is only as good as the culture it's being used in. So the real question isn't about an app's features. It's about the team's culture. Because a perfect tool in an imperfect world is always going to fail.